Hello and welcome. I'm Riza with Full Awakening, and we're here to bring you our 21st episode of Stories of Awakening. I'm here with a very special guest today. They're all special guests, but this is one of my favorites, Aaron Overstreet. Aaron is a breathwork facilitator who I've worked with in Portland and who I know through the Lead Tribe. And he is an incredibly gentle and wise soul. And we have a lot of wisdom that we are looking at harvesting from this conversation. I can tell already it's going to be a really rich one. So I'm going to put his website at the bottom here. It's respirepdx.com, and you'll have access to that. But here is Aaron, and I look forward to hearing what comes out in this conversation. So Aaron, please tell us where you're joining us from, and if you could, give us your definition of awakening.
All right. Thank you, Riza. It's such an honor to be here and be on the show. I'm looking forward to it. I'm in Portland, Oregon right now. It's having a nice, rare, rainy day. It's been beautiful and in the 80s, and all of a sudden today we have some rain, and it's lovely. Yeah, so awakening to me, it's a really good question, and it's a vast question. In my work, what I see is that as people awaken, there's this expansion into the fullness of who we are. And as humans, our emotional spectrum is huge. And, as we open up this emotional spectrum and have more awareness and awakening, we have more joy, more happiness on one end. On the other end, that also opens us up into this trauma. We were talking about trauma a few minutes ago before we started, and there's a lot of trauma on this planet. It's when I look out into the world and see the way people are reacting right now, there's a lot of trauma behind this division. And if we want to feel better, we want to awaken to our light, to our full potential of who we are. That also means going down into the other end of that spectrum, into the pain, into the trauma, and witnessing it, seeing it, healing it. So that's when I work with clients, that's basically what I do, is I help people to expand into and love and process that trauma and that pain, whether it's from childhood, from this life, from a past life, or a collective trauma. The more we shine light onto our being, the more it exposes what's been hidden in the corners. And for me, that awakening is that process of healing our trauma. And if we ignore our trauma, we can't rise up into the higher dimensions, the higher consciousness. There's no bypassing it. Mm-hmm. And processing it and healing it can take different forms. Breath work. That's why I love breath work, is because it's a self-sufficiency with that healing. It's your breath, it's your body. I show people how they can go in using their breath, access these things that need healing, and do it on their own with support. So the awakening is waking up to our full potential. And once we are no longer controlled by this trauma that when we ignore the trauma, or it's in the subconscious, it's deep in our psyche, it's operating behind the scenes, it's driving us. And when we, creating negative thoughts, negative beliefs, and when we heal that, we can then use our emotions with our mind to really be the creator gods that we are. The mind and the emotions are the king and the queen of the kingdom, and thought is creative, and when you can bring positive emotion into that creative aspect of thought, it amplifies it to this amazing, powerful, just creative force. And I feel like that's, stepping into our role as creators, taking our power back from, not the source of the trauma, but giving our power away to the trauma. I think a lot of us through many lifetimes have just been overwhelmed with this collective trauma, or with just trying to just live and just have a basic life. And now we're at the point where people are cleaning up. People are cleaning up themselves, or helping to clean up others. And so it's an opportunity to step into that role of being the creators and creating with higher self, with spirit, with source, as co-creation. That's awakening.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love that your definition brings in trauma, because I think that a lot of people think of awakening just as like a out of box experience, something that you experience that sort of cracks open that dull sort of habitual way that we live. But I think that the first thing that we encounter, we might encounter a sense of elation for having an experience that is outside of our norm. But I think that the trauma is very quick to follow, right? And that is sort of what is underneath that causes us to be lulled into that sleep of that habitual way of living. So I think the big thing that comes up for me is fear, that as we move into that place of creational energies, how do we do that from a place of love and not from a place of fear, right? So again, that comes back to the trauma. So I'm curious, one is how breathwork, because my experience of breathwork, one is that it can facilitate an awakening experience. It can facilitate an experience that's drug-free, that is medicine-free, but puts you in a similar state of connection with spirit that can kind of blow you out of the water, right? A little bit, crack you open. But does breath work also help in processing fear and processing powerlessness and processing trauma just through the use of breath itself?
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like you said, we can, awakening can be having that really blissful, amazing moment where you're high, you're spiritually high, and then the trauma kind of follows, because we open up that higher end of the spectrum. We're opening up down here, and then we're going to, the trauma is going to get cleaned out by this vibration that we've opened up to. And breath work works both ways, where you can have this really ecstatic experience with it, and that will stir up, and that vibration of the ecstatic experience will stir up the fear, the pain, and bring it to the surface. And then the breath supports processing it. It also works the other way, where sometimes with the breath work, it'll just take you right into this end of the spectrum. And as this cleans out, then as you release the heavier, or the fear, the pain, then it also is opening up this end of the spectrum. Then you feel that afterwards. So let me explain the type of breath work I do and how it was discovered. It's called Rebirthing Breathwork. Holotropic breath work, transformational breath work, they're all very similar. They're based on rebirthing. Rebirthing was discovered in the early 70s, late 60s by a man named Leonard Orr. And Leonard he'd become a born-again Christian, and he really believed that Christians would have eternal life. And when he realized Christians actually died, he got a little disillusioned and started studying Eastern philosophies, and these, like in India, they, immortals are just everyday thing. You go to India, it's like, yeah, there's immortals in the hills, and it's just part of their culture is immortality. Mm-hmm. Through these yogis that have got this mastery. And Leonard started studying that, and then he started experimenting with altered states of being naturally, through fasting. He hadn't done any breath work. He hadn't really discovered the breath yet, but he started staying in the bathtub all night long. And he found that he would be in the bathtub, and he would come up against what he called an urgency barrier. I got to get out. I've been here too long. It can happen when you're meditating. And when you sit through that barrier, he discovered he would have a release. Sometimes it would be an emotional release. Sometimes he'd see a story dismantle. So he was doing this every night. And then one night he went back to his birth memories. He was able to remember his birth. He had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck 3 times. He was trying to kill himself because his mom, he was like the 10th kid or something, and his mom was really vocal that she didn't want any more kids. He heard that in the womb. So he thought, to make his mom happy, he would kill himself. And he was able to unravel all of that and to see that as an adult, when he would get into a relationship with a woman, he would get suicidal. And he never understood why. And so he was able to see that connection and to heal that and to heal some of his birth trauma. So he had an aha, this is a powerful thing. He wanted to share it with others. So he rented out a hot tub, and people would come with a snorkel, which became the umbilical cord. The hot tub becomes the womb. His energy system has gone through this. So he would sit in the tub with them, and people would start going into their birth memories. For some people, it was actually re-traumatizing because they didn't have a tool to process it. And so people that had really traumatic births, they would go back to that trauma, and it wasn't really helpful. What he saw as he was doing these rebirthings was that when people would kind of crawl out of the tub and lay there and try to process, some people's breath would start doing this specific connected circular breathing where there's no pause between the inhale and exhale. And that those people whose bodies naturally took them into this breath, they were able to process it and really got the healing out of the experience. So he saw that this is a built-in mechanism in the body to process trauma, this circular breathing. It's something the body already knows how to do. And, our bodies heal. If you cut your skin, it's going to heal. And it heals faster when we're in balance. So it makes sense the body also has a mechanism for healing energy and emotion, and that is the breath. So with rebirthing breathwork, so he then saw that like the triggering people into their birth memories wasn't necessary, that you could just have someone lay down, you could direct them into this breathing that he observed, and they would have this amazing, powerful experience. And it's got a natural cycle to it that's about 1.5 hours. And in that cycle, part of what the breathing does is it relaxes you to a deep theta state while flooding the body with prana. And that energy, that pure life energy that you're flooding in has a vibration. That vibration, and if you're holding something in your body of a lower vibration, like an old trauma, an old emotion, that vibration you're bringing into your body will come up against it and shake it loose. And while you're in a deeply, deeply relaxed state. So that's kind of how this form of breath work, it can go in, and these things that we've been avoiding looking at our whole life, these old traumas, these old stories, it can go in and just start to bring that to the surface. Sometimes it's the sessions, if I'm giving somebody a session, this 1.5 hour breathing process can be very deeply relaxing, and people are just like tuning into their spirit guides. Other times it's very active, the body is tingling, emotions are pouring out. But it's always a self-cleaning mechanism, kind of like your stove. You hit the self-cleaning mechanism on the stove, you hit the button, you shut it, and it does its thing. You turn this mechanism on in your body, you have someone there guiding it, keeping you going, supporting you, and you just kind of, step back. Once you're in this theta state, you can just kind of step back and watch things happen. And a lot of these emotions that are stuck in our body, this fear that maybe, as being a kid can be scary. Going to school, there's school trauma, religious trauma, parental disapproval, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it can be. And then there's sexual abuse, physical abuse. And if we can't fully feel these things when they happen as kids, if we don't have the support to feel it as deeply as we need to, it just stays there, it doesn't go away. And people can live their whole lives keeping it packed down. And it will eventually cause disease or cause, just imbalances in our life. So this breath work, it helps people get to that stuff that's behind the scenes, when it comes up, sometimes it's felt again because it wasn't fully felt. So sometimes during the breath work will bring the fear, like, you asked about fear, and sometimes, yeah, people will be breathing and this intense fear comes up. And the more they relax into it, just let it move through. It's not that you're just re-experiencing it, but it's getting cleaned out. It's being lifted out of the system, but it goes through the senses because that was how it got blocked in the first place, was it wasn't allowed to go through the senses. And so, with ways to heal that are conscious parenting, like you're doing, like, letting your kids cry, letting them have their emotions. And, there's this whole generation now of people who are allowing emotion, and it's a big part of cleaning this all up. And then also, so many people are looking at their own emotions, and this lockdown that we've all been in, for me, I recognize right away, okay, this is a fear purge, this is a global fear purge. And some people, without the tools to know that they can feel that fear fully and let it move through and get to the other side of it, a lot of people, get stuck in it. I think, especially in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of opinions and fiery arguments, and people are fired up about what they believe and what they think. I think because it helps you feel safe. If you know what's going on in the world and you have an opinion, you're a little safer, and so that you can kind of, quiet your fear a little bit. Because to be in that place of like, it's complete chaos, I have no idea, can be really scary. And if you don't have the tools to actually feel that fear, or no one has ever told you, like, no, it's okay to feel that, So yeah, I do see fear come up. That's a big thing that comes up for people in their sessions. One of the things that can happen with rebirthing is tetany. Did you have tetany in your sessions, the tingling?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and your hands, like your hands can tingle.
Yeah, I felt like I was
hands.
holding stones in my hands. Like I had this very specific feeling, like there were these big rose quartz stones in each hand, and my hand was like curled around it. Yeah, tons of tingling.
Yeah. And that it's called tetany, and for some people, that's the body will use it to bring fear to the surface, because the body, sometimes it'll feel like you can't move, you're tingling. It's an experience that you've never had before. And for some people, it can feel out of control. It passes in the rebirthing breathwork cycle, that hour-and-a-half cycle. It's something that can happen. It doesn't always happen, but it passes. But the body can sometimes use it to stimulate fear. And as soon as somebody, really lets themselves feel the fear and just lets go, that physical sensation releases and the emotion releases. Our bodies don't want us to be holding fear. So sometimes the body will communicate through sensations that are uncomfortable, pain, to try to get us to feel sadness or fear. But our society is it's kind of based on comfort, and we're taught that we shouldn't feel discomfort. And so if our body is using discomfort to get us to feel something, it seems anti-intuitive to then go into the discomfort. Mm-hmm. But when we go into it, that's when we can pop out the other side and process it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, fear, it's up for everybody right now. And that's part of the awakening, is because that fear isn't being created. It's been part of our collective. It's been in us. It's been suppressed, and it's being brought to the surface. And especially, I think, as we're stuck at home with ourselves, with our families, it's kind of really shameful stuff is coming up. Like, I know for myself, the stuff I've been processing, I've been successfully able to suppress it for most of my, all my life, for 51 years. And when you're just with yourself, or you're just at home, you can't do the things to distract from these things. The stuff that we've, worked really hard to avoid is coming up. And, it's stuff that I think for me, like looking at shame as a healthy tool for the higher self to communicate with us where we were out of alignment, or, and I'm not talking about where we've been shamed, we've taken on shame from others, but where, like, things we have to look at, like, oh yeah, like in that instance, I could have done better, or it's good to reflect on that. Maybe next time I can do something different. Because those are places I think where the ego can easily justify our actions. And, I've seen that with my clients lately of just like, yeah, like just having to look at that stuff, the fear, the shame, anger is up for people. And that's part of that awakening is, just opening up to that human experience. We're humans, we feel, and that gives us so much power. And we can be manipulated emotionally. And so as we reclaim that power, it's that sovereignty of like, yeah, we are creators. If you sit and do a visualization for something you want, create a visualization, and you bring in the emotional element, it makes it so much more powerful.
Yeah. And that can be such a hard thing to do. That can be really, really challenging to commit to, to say, I have this future vision and it's really beautiful and I can see it, but I want to actually feel it so I can call it to myself. To sit there and to actually really, really feel it is very, very powerful. And I think that mostly people don't do that. Mostly that feels dangerous or scary or too intense to get out of the emotional state that they're looping in and get into an emotional state that expresses the thing that they most desire to experience.
Yeah, that's why cleaning up the emotional state, cleaning up the emotional body is so important, because then you can know that it's what you're creating, what you're asking for is coming from a pure place and not a place of trauma or avoidance. And
yeah, we're kind of, when you were giving this image of us all in our little boxes, we're like all in our own self-clean cycle for the ovens, right? The heat has been put on and we're all sort of baking out. And I've been seeing that too. I very similar messaging from my guidance around this being a time for us to just cleanse, like to cleanse inside our own little units, our own nuclear family units, because the pain and the suffering and the emotions and the trauma is often very localized, right, to our family units. And so we really need to bake that out between ourselves. And I'm very interested in this idea that tetany was the word that you used, that sort of that vibrational paralysis, that we get when we do breath work, that's the fear being brought to the surface. That flashed for me this memory of these 3 distinct awakening episodes I had throughout my life, starting when I was at 22. And then the last one I had was when I was 38 maybe. And all of them were these approaches by power that I had when I was just falling asleep. So like just in that in-between state between sleep and awake. And 2 times, all 3 times actually, it was a male figure that approached me, but from 3 different angles. So the first one was from this left part of me. The second one was directly, and the third one was here. And every time I got that adrenaline, tingly paralysis experience. And I think our interaction with emotions is very interesting, right? So to sidetrack for a moment, I think one of the things that's part of that clearing that you're talking about is becoming very aware of what emotions we're experiencing. So often for myself, like I will state what I'm experiencing. Like I'm feeling a lot of anxiety right now, or I'm feeling really confused, or I'm feeling really angry, or I'm feeling overjoyed and ecstatic, or I'm feeling, whatever it is I'm feeling, I like to name it and to understand it. So that understanding, like what you're talking about with these realizations that people have of seeing the story of their birth or seeing the story of the trauma and being like, oh, that's why X, Y, and Z. I understand. And the moment you can understand it, then you can begin to release it. It's like, then it just starts to like kind of dissipate or unravel itself. And the Buddha says that understanding is the first step towards love, right? So if we're to love ourselves or love the world or love each other, understanding ourselves and the world and each other is a wonderful place to start. But just to go back to this fear experience for a moment, one of the things, I'm going to go kind of quickly through the experience. So the first time it happened, I was really scared, and I felt that there was this man, this like shadow of a man, I call him. So to me, my guidance said he was an astral projection of a man, and he was walking towards me, and he was talking to me, and he was saying, don't be scared, but it's okay to be a little afraid, because you're afraid you're going to remember this in the morning. And he said, I'm just here to mark you. I'm here to mark you so I can watch your progress. Great. And he gave this impression of being this little like mountain man, this little mountain shaman from like South America. He was wearing like a hat and like a poncho type outfit. But he was just like a shadow, like he wasn't a fully corporeal or like what I've seen from spirits or ghosts. Like he seemed different, right? And he came up to me and he tapped my arm, my left arm where this whale tattoo is. And he tapped it 3 times, and then I fell immediately asleep. It's still in the state of just like terror, right? Like I was just terrified. I was fighting. I was like, get away from me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I was just like in complete terror. And I went in and had this dream immediately that I was getting a tattoo on that exact place on my arm. And the word I was getting tattooed was initiation. But when I woke up, I couldn't say initiation. It was intention and initiation. Those 2 words, intention, initiation, would flip in my head. So I held that experience for many years. And then many years later, a decade later, I had a similar experience, but I had just learned through reading Pema Chodron that something to do when you're experiencing fear in dream time is to turn towards that fear, right? To open your heart towards the fear and to like face it off head first, to heart first, to not push it away or run away from it, but to actually turn towards it. And so I was holding that as a possibility. So I was having this fear experience where I was falling asleep. I was actually doing a self-Reiki protocol. So I was kind of in a meditation. And the moment I touched my pubic symphysis, where, the root chakra is, I went into this paralysis fear state where I was completely paralyzed and tingly and just like all this energy, right? And I heard my husband's voice. I saw him in my mind's eye walking to the foot of the bed, and it was like at my feet, like tapping my feet. And he was going, hey, 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 like in this rhythmic drumming sound. And I was like having this paralysis, but in my mind, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you saying that over and over again like that? What's going on? And all of a sudden I knew it was not my husband. It was not Tim. It was some other entity that was using his voice and the impression of his body. And I just like spiraled into fear. But what I did was I actually opened my heart to it. And I asked myself, what am I afraid of? And so I started to draw the fear inside my heart and deeper into my heart. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? I'm afraid of being hurt. I'm afraid of not knowing who this is. I'm afraid of annihilation. I'm afraid of losing my family. I'm afraid, right? Going into the fear. And finally, there was a point where I just expanded into space. I was in space. I was a galaxy. I was exploding into a galaxy of stars. And there was just this laughter coming from the center of the galaxy. And it was my voice laughing at the absurdity of the intensity of the fear that we experience as humans. The intensity of the fear that anything could be bad or wrong or too hurtful, or that we would be annihilated or some way cease to exist, or that we would lose ourselves. That fear that is so strong inside our human bodies, just from our soul aspect, from the infinite swirl of stars that we come from, is just ridiculous to a certain extent. And I just started laughing so hard as a galaxy that I laughed myself back into my body and sat up just laughing, guffawing in my bed, just laughing. And I went downstairs, and my husband's sitting on the couch watching TV, and I'm like, have you been upstairs recently? And he's like, no, why? And I'm like, nothing, no reason. I'm just going to drink some water and go back to bed. So that was number 2. Number 3, and there's a point to all of this sharing, but number 3, I was in a hotel room at a Lee Harris event in San Diego. And I was just falling asleep. And I had this impression as I was falling asleep that I was being held by this divine masculine energy who knows what that divine masculine energy was, right? But it was holding me, and we were sort of outlines of ourselves. So I was kind of nestled in this divine masculine embrace. And then from this other side, this very dark, intense, maniacal, I don't know, evil energy, I don't know what it was, a dark energy came at me and grabbed my arm around like the wrist, grabbed my arm and like got in my face and was like, rah, you know? And that energy of fear rose, right? That tingling fear paralysis. But instead of going into paralysis, I just, no hesitation, grabbed this being and shoved it into my heart. And it immediately dissipated. And I just fell off into a lovely sleep. So my point is, as you were sharing, I was thinking, you know, there's two ways really. There's this way of understanding what the fear is, and the way that the fear then starts to unravel and sort of, it's like it starts to evaporate from our bodies is the image I get. Like it starts to like kind of particularize, and it just drifts, like wafts off our body and is taken out and up. And I always envision that emotions, when they're going out of the body, it's like smoke, like rising, right? It just goes up into source energy. It just gets absorbed that way. But this other way is this portal in our heart. And I feel like our heart has this magical portal that we can really cultivate, and we can open, and then we can actually consume fear, and consume hatred, and consume rage, and consume grief. We can actually eat it in the heart fire. And that's also a really powerful experience to have, and one that I hold dear in my own process, my own awakening process. So that's not really a question.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you say consume it. I use the word compost it.
Yeah.
Like we can take that waste material, that old emotion, and fertilize our being with it, fertilize the world with it. And it's that transformation by accepting it, loving it. Love transforms. And that's really what happens is when people see the fear and the pain and the trauma and get that understanding that you spoke about, they understand, oh, here it came from this. And, you know, and just whether it's the simplicity of how it came about or the complexity of the, you know, generational things that maybe are passed down, when you get that understanding, it's just appreciation and love, and it transforms it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Can I share a breathing exercise with you about the heart? Some heart breathing, I call it.
Yes, please do.
Okay. We're going to be using the hands. So if you know the viewers can do it, are you able to set your daughter down?
Yeah, she's asleep. So I'm going to pause the recording actually and go lay her down for a moment and see if that allows me to have hands usage. All right, that worked, and we're back, and I have free hands. So yes, please show us. Thank you, Aaron.
This is an exercise I came up with a few weeks ago. My partner Bhagavati and I do a free hour on Zoom of yoga and breathwork every Saturday, and people can find a link to that at my website. It's from 10 to 11, sometimes goes a little longer. And often we don't know what we're going to do. It's just very spontaneous. And while she's doing, do a little breath work and then some yoga. And while she's doing the yoga, I'll just kind of get these ideas for breath work and then try them out on people. But one of the things that, and this one, I really feel like it's really useful right now because it's just all about the heart chakra. And what I've been taught is that we take in love from the back of the heart chakra. And that term stabbed in the back. If somebody betrays us, it often feels like we've been stabbed in the back because that's where we bring in love. And so that's also where we would feel betrayal. And then that love goes, we send love out through the front of the heart, but it comes in through the back. Sometimes that's why somebody's hand on our back sometimes feels so good. Mm. And so we're going to use a little bit of kind of using some of the physical body with some visualization in the breath. The physical part is that we're going to just gently press our hands together in as prayer with our thumbs pressed against our sternum. And as you gently press your hands together, feel how you can separate your shoulder blades and open your back body. And it's pretty easy to feel it around the shoulder blades. You might be able to feel it behind the solar plexus, or maybe even up to the base of the skull. Just that kind of opening the back body, and then pulling on the hands and opening the front body, feeling this spread open. And each time we come back to pulling on the hands, we're going to switch our grip. And so as we push and open the back body, we're going to breathe in, and just visualizing breathing in that pure prana from the sun, from the air, from the ether. It's all around us. And breathing in that pure prana into the back of our heart chakra, opening up the front and breathing it out. And this for some people, you may notice a block or something in your own heart chakra that this can clear out. Or it may feel good just to take that pure love energy, channel it through your heart chakra, and just send it out to the world. You can, visualizing it as just water or white flower petals of peace, or just sending it out, maybe, starting with like your house, then your block, then your city. Or, just sending it back into yourself, into your own energy bubble. But when I first started doing this, I did it at one of these Saturday classes, came up with the idea, and then later that day, I had a huge purge out of my heart. It had cleaned some stuff out, and I didn't feel it until later. And sometimes working with the breath and energy will do that. So let's do that for a few breaths. Gently pushing, opening the back body, breathing in, pulling, opening the front body and breathing out. In through the back of the heart. Breathing out the front of the heart. And even just visualizing that pure energy going through the heart chakra is enough. You don't have to really worry about where it goes. And then I like to invite people to put their hands down and feel it just by relaxing their back, letting it open, breathing in. Relaxing the front body, letting it open, breathing out. And then after breathing like that for a while, to just imagine if you can feel both the back body and the front body opening, like maybe the shoulders front and back just kind of open and spread open. And it's just this, as you gently breathe, just that continuous flow of energy, prana, moving through the heart chakra. Yeah, and I would just invite people to, if you feel like it, you could, if they're listening to this, you could pause it and work with this for a while now or later, but to do it until you get high. Just do it until you feel really high, and that might mean cleaning something out of your heart, but it's a good way to just, send that love energy out into the world, and that fire in the heart that can eat the fear, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, beautiful.
So there's so many ways to work with the breath, and there's so many different types of breath work, and they're all valuable. They all use different techniques. With rebirthing, there's a big part of it is dropping the exhale, where there's just like giving it up to gravity. Or other forms of breath work, you control the exhale, and there's a purpose for that, and they're all really valuable. And so I would invite people to explore that. If you're interested in breath work, to explore the different types, like Wim Hof breathing, box breathing. There's all these techniques that can calm the nervous system, or that can energize you, that can, rebirthing is definitely on the therapeutic end of the spectrum. And, it's about healing emotions. And anytime you work with the breath, it's bound to trigger some emotions, because the breath is just so connected with our emotions. And you'll see, like, if you're stressed and you don't want to feel something, you'll hold your breath. And which can also be very effective and can be a coping mechanism that is valuable, to get us out of a threatening situation to a place where then we can process it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just invite people to play with their breath, breathe deeper. This morning I took like a nice hour bath and just experimented with just like these long, deep, full breaths, and kind of massaging into the top of the breath, and then exhaling and massaging into the bottom of the exhale. you know, it can show us a lot. When we look at our breath, it can show us where we don't want to feel something, where we're not letting go of something, or we don't want to connect with something. It can show us our aliveness when our inhale feels strong and feels open, you know, and we're just ready to embrace life. You know, our breath is an amazing teacher.
It's amazing to me, the breath, because it's, you know, it's such a central aspect of so many different spiritual practices. It's something that's with us always, right? We always have our breath from the moment we take our first to the moment we take our last. But the quality of breath, it can be varied, very varied, right? It's primarily an autonomic function. You know, we don't often concentrate on our breath. But when we do concentrate on our breath, I feel like people either experience, you know, a largeness of breath, or they experience just how contracted their diaphragm is and how shallow their breathing has been. And so there's two things that come to mind. There's many things that come to mind, actually. You know, one is I've been thinking about breath a lot, of course, because during COVID, that is, you know, we are in this like fear, life or death pandemic situation that has so much to do with our breath, right? And our ability to take a deep breath is part of the gauge of whether you have COVID or not, right? And that people are suffering because they can't take a full breath. They can't breathe deeply. So I'm going to have to pause again because the baby is awake. Oh, she's awake and she's happy about it. That's remarkable. She's going to just crawl on over here and just join us on this. Come over here then, if you just want to be a part of the action.
Watching children breathe, you know, if you watch a child breathe, their breath is often it's circular. It's often very connected. Animals breathe that way. Like, you know, if there hasn't been a lot of trauma introduced into the breath, like, yeah, kids know how to breathe.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. You know, for me, I had asthma as a child, and I didn't get it until my parents were divorcing. Like, there was that big emotional trauma. So we moved locations, my parents split up, like there was divorce, and then I went into like, and it's got to be the worst feeling, right? Not being able to breathe, not being able to get a full breath in. And it is absolutely emotionally connected. You know,
when I've worked through my own asthma, I've helped clients work through asthma, and it's grief. Yeah, the lungs store our grief. The same thing when my parents split. That's when I started getting my breathing problems.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And we don't, the medical, you know, the Western medical paradigm doesn't address that at all. You know, it doesn't address the grief. I learned that when I was in massage therapy school and learning about Chinese medicine. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. She's breathing right now. She's doing. My husband always says that when I get frustrated, I have audible exhales. So I like very like deep, like, you know, deep exhales. And the baby, being a little mimicker like she is, does this audible exhale sometimes when she senses I'm getting frustrated with something. She goes.
Yeah. There's a rebirther I know who says, if you don't hear anybody sighing, it's your turn. There's been times when like I'll be in the line at the post office and I'll just take a deep breath, and people will turn to me and be like, I know, right? You know, it's like we'll associate that with frustration when really it can just be like relaxing into a situation or letting go.
Yeah, sometimes you recognize the amount of tension, the amount of holding that you're doing with your breath, and you just have to like let it out, you know? So there's two questions I have. So these are the two questions. One is for people that experience anxiety and have a hard time getting a deep breath in, do you have any suggestions or any specific breaths that people can use to loosen the diaphragm and to allow them to get deep breaths?
Yeah. There's another exercise I came up with recently that kind of helps. It massages the top and the bottom of the top of the inhale and the bottom of the exhale. And it's by using these kind of tiers where you breathe in to a comfortable place and hold it. So it's a full breath, but not straining. You breathe in, you hold it. And then as you hold it without exhaling, notice where you're using muscles, or notice any tension. And it could be like a mental tension, energetic tension. Usually it's a physical tension. And as you hold at the top of that inhale, just notice where you can relax, and then breathe in again. Notice where you're holding muscles you don't need, relax it. It's usually kind of about 4 tiers before your breath is full. Let the exhale drop out. Just take a few natural breaths. I usually have people do it like 2 or 3 times at the top of the inhale and then 2 or 3 times at the bottom of the exhale. The bottom of the exhale, there's a little bit of a squeezing necessary. So kind of a gentle squeeze as you empty it, and then hold. And notice where you're using muscles around that squeezing. Relax it, squeeze out, and then just kind of like wringing out a sponge till you get it all out, and then let the inhale pop up. A few of those, you'll notice that your inhale becomes very long and open. The exhale becomes bigger. That it's just like when you're getting a massage and somebody hits a tender spot, you tense around it, but when you relax, they can go deeper. It's the same thing with the breath. So you can massage the top of the inhale and the bottom of the exhale. You know, knowing your limits. You know, it's okay to go into discomfort, but if you feel pain, back away. You know, just like with yoga or anything. And that can help just kind of open up that spectrum of the breath. With the anxiety, box breathing is really helpful. That's the breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4. That's really good with calming the nervous system. You know, it can get people out of fight or flight. And you mentioned earlier being able to name emotions. And I think that's something that is so valuable. If you can learn to recognize when we go into fight or flight, if a person can just notice that moment of like, oh, I'm going into fight or flight, because usually we don't notice till afterwards. And you can step away from whatever is triggering you and do some breathing. It can change the situation. And the box breathing is really good for that. You know, the anxiety around the breath is often birth trauma. We're born, you know, the placenta still has some of our blood. The umbilical cord is cut. When we're allowed to take our first breath on our own, it pulls that blood from the placenta through the umbilical cord into our body. We get all our blood, and it's on our terms. We're allowed to take our first breath. In most hospital births, when the cord is cut, it's life or death. You're not ready to breathe. Your lungs are filled with fluid, and it can, along with whatever else is happening in the operating room, temperature changes, bright lights, being handled roughly, being separated from your mother. A lot of trauma can get locked into the breathing because of that, because it's that first breath is just, it's life or death. And so looking at that, if people have a lot of anxiety or panic attacks, as they go into breath work, to be aware that it can bring that stuff to the surface, and to go gentle. When people come see me and it's just hard for them to breathe, or they have panic attacks, just a little, I don't have them breathe these big, full, deep breaths. It's just like a gentle, connected breathing rhythm, and all it is connecting the inhale to the exhale, and that's enough. It doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be powerful. One thing I see a lot is that people's nervous systems will discharge during breath work, and sometimes that means twitching or like jolting, and so things like shaking, and the different therapies that bring in this kind of the body movements or discharging through the body with some gentle breathing are really valuable. Yeah, that box breathing is very soothing for the nervous system. One thing, some homework I often give people is to write a story to their nervous system, to sit down, look at their birth, their early childhood, and just kind of look at like, okay, these negative beliefs, these negative stories I'm seeing now in my life probably came from this early childhood. And 0 to 2, our nervous system, especially if a parent leaves or if another sibling is born and all the attention goes away from us, it can feel like we're going to die, and that can get locked in our nervous system. So I'll have people just write the story of like, when I was born, I was fully supported. I was, and just write the ideal birth for them that would just help support where they want to be supported in life. My parents, for me, it was my parents stayed together, and my father taught me how to cope with these things. In my story, he didn't leave. And I wrote this story as if it was true. My conscious mind knows it's not, but my nervous system doesn't. The nervous system is kind of like a computer program. So I wrote this story from birth to 4 years old, my just ideal life to support me where I'm at now. And so I will invite my clients to do that, and then to call up a friend and read it to them. And reading it to somebody else out loud is very powerful. And then also to reread it regularly. And then I found that when I got into a triggering situation where I would normally get triggered by something, I could think, oh no, that's right. My dad stuck around, and he taught me how to deal with this, and I can relax. And my nervous system didn't know the difference. And so you can use, as you're working with the emotions and the breath, it's important to also work with the mind and the subconscious. Healing these emotional things and freeing ourselves from them also then frees our mind to come up with new stories. And it's important to reprogram the subconscious with what we want and to change our beliefs. But writing a letter to the nervous system of just this, writing a new story, can be very supportive.
I love that. That's that's a great exercise that would be highly accessible to anybody who can write and imagine. And it's very similar to a soul retrieval-esque technique that I use called the zipper method. So one of the things that we find a lot in trauma, right, is soul loss, especially in early childhood, right? And in psychological terms, they call that disassociation, but in shamanic terms, we might call that stepping out. So your soul sort of steps out during moments of trauma. And I think for adults, it happens too in moments of trauma, especially sudden trauma, like a car accident or something like that. And so what happens is we have all these issues that happen after we've had a soul loss incident, where there's just a piece of us that's kind of stuck at that time and place, or off in some other dimension or some imagined realm, hiding out, and we don't feel empowered or complete, or we don't feel fully ourselves. So soul retrieval is like a very old technique that's used in a lot of different shamanic cultures, where a shaman would go in and sort of search out the soul piece that's missing and bring it back and help the person to reintegrate it. But something that I found, I kind of stumbled upon a few years ago that I've been using a lot with clients, is rewriting the story, similar to like what you do, where we go back before the incident happens, before the trauma happens, and we talk the person through what's about to happen. And the whole goal is to create a story in which we don't leave. So very similar to the trauma of there's a story that exists now where your dad didn't leave. In the zipper method, there's a version of the story where we don't walk away, where the whole point is to stay with the body, stay with the experience that we're having, so that we don't abandon the body. And then that whole new story just gets zipped up with the story that we've been living, and it heals the story all the way through. So I see the same sort of magic in what you're describing. And it's true that our nervous system and our subconscious, that we don't know the difference between what we dream or what we imagine and what actually happens. And in fact, usually we are rewriting our historical story over and over and over again anyway, and repeating it to ourselves, the trauma that we had, affirming that identity, affirming that brokenness or that trauma. And it would be just as easy to create a new narrative and to tie that together with the old narrative to create that healing. And I love that idea and that suggestion.
It's like
for some reason,
hacking. It's just like a 3D hack. This matrix is real, and we can hack it. We can, like you said, we're rewriting the history, and that just kind of shows how this is real, but at the same time, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I think that our minds are our minds are what make us human, right? Our minds are what make us human. They are something that causes us a certain amount of suffering beyond the kind of suffering that other animal creatures experience, but they also give us this opportunity to connect and create in a way that is so unique to our human nature. And so I think that it is important for us to be able to work collaboratively with our minds for the highest purpose of ourselves and the earth and creation. And using the power of our mind to create healing is such a powerful notion. Yeah, I love it. I was just thinking the flash of Hamilton came to mind. I don't know if you've seen Hamilton on stage, or now they have like a video, Netflix. Is it Netflix or is it Disney? I don't know. It's on one of these channels. Netflix, I think, has like a movie version of Hamilton, of the stage production, which is very cool. They didn't like make a movie, but they filmed the stage production. And the whole point of Hamilton is it's a hip hop musical about the story of the founding fathers and the founding of this country, but it's all being played by people of color. So it's this really interesting rewriting of history in this sense, in this very healing sense of putting people of color and sort of this modern aesthetic of music into this story of revolution and liberation and independence that was not fair, was not liberating for everyone, right? But it's it's creating this this new narrative, I guess. And it's all the rage, right? This is something that is societally up right now. There's many people in our culture that are watching this movie kind of on repeat. There's something that people are thirsting for in the story, trying to understand both our origins in a way that is proud, you know? I think I've never really felt proud of being an American, but watching the story, I was like, you know, there is some pride to be had in the fight towards liberation, right? This hero's quest of liberation, but also rewriting the story in a way that is more evocative of the racial conflict that we have always had in this country, because this country is based on one hand, liberation from oppression, and on the other hand, was based on oppression of other people. And so it's within this oppressive model. We have a lot of opportunity to heal as a society and as a people.
That's one of those places, as we get that awareness and awakening, that's one of those places where it's going to be really uncomfortable to look at that stuff. And we have to, you know, to look at that, what that brings up for us and the discomfort. And, you know, it's awakening to the reality of that, you know, without getting hijacked by the discomfort, you know, to feel it, to see it, acknowledge it, and to let it, you know, it can fuel positive action now, it can fuel rewriting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is that it's almost this, there's something about it that is evocative emotionally and relatable to the current mind and the current, you know, we have this thirst for knowledge, right? We have this thirst for understanding. That's part of the awakening that happens. There's this pop that happens. There's this crack in reality. And all of a sudden we realize it's like the Matrix, right? We've taken the pill and we're in the Matrix and we're like, holy shit, nothing is what we thought it was. Everything is this other thing altogether. And so, you know, obviously people of color are not having an awakening about oppression. They're like, yeah, that's the life I've always been living. This is reality. But many people who are not people of color are like having this moment where they're like, oh, I see it in a different way. Like I'm understanding our current situation and our history in a different way. And so then there's this thirst for knowledge thing that's happening. And I think it's the same with a spiritual awakening of any kind. There's this thirst to understand, this thirst to dive deep, but there's this exhaustion that can happen, right? Being hijacked by the emotion, being hijacked and like just feeling overwhelmed, feeling tired and overwhelmed. So I think that's where art comes in. That's where creativity comes in. Spirit says to me often, as long as people are still creating and expressing through creativity, we're going to be fine. It's going to be okay, right? So there is something beautiful about experiencing someone's art as an expression of truth and humanity and hope. You know, this change, this rewriting of the narrative that we can experience is very powerful on a personal and on a societal level.
Yeah. yeah, and art is so emotional. You know, somebody can talk to you about emotion, but if somebody can show you a piece of art and you feel it, you know, and it's a way to share that experience. And,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, and it can also bridge, you know, the dimensions. Like art can open our mind and open our spirit, and it's so powerful.
And music, I think that that's a big part of it too, is that music interacts with the human psyche and our energy systems in a way that's different than just words themselves or ideas. There's something about music that really changes us, you know, and that breath even that we're talking about, you know, that creates that theta sort of brainwave. It's like, that is that rhythm, right? We enter into a certain rhythm, and the rhythm speaks to us on a level.
Yeah, rhythm and vibration. Yeah. Yeah, I do. You know, when people come see me in person, I've started using a lot of sound healing. You know, I've got crystal bowls, practitioners bowls, and you know, drums, and chimes, and like, and yeah, that just the vibration of a tone, a note, you know, it goes into our bodies. It can affect us. It can support healing, or support purging, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first time I ever heard a singing bowl, and I was like, how is it? This is like the sound of the universe.
Yeah.
Like, this is a sound that I've always heard, but I've never located before. It's all around us. You know, the singing bowl stops and you still hear it. You still hear it everywhere, right? And it almost felt like, I mean, my first experiences were learning how to play it. So I'd never heard someone professionally play it, but as I learned how to make that sound, it was like not the sound coming from the bowl. It was like the sound coming to the bowl. Was the sensation that I had, like it was being gathered in the bowl. Yeah, so sound healing is incredibly powerful, and I think that it's something that we will continue to use as a people as healing potential. Okay, so I'm aware we're getting to our hour, but I want to bring in, just as a final, like, for some reason I'm seeing a Hershey kiss at the end of a meal. For the Hershey kiss at the end of the meal, wouldn't that be a reality if we had Hershey kisses at the end of all our meals? That came from like some past time. I don't know when that was. So we had an image at the beginning of our talk today before we went into the recorded part. So through our meditation, this image keeps popping up, and I want to share it with our audience and see if you have any words of wisdom that we can pluck out of here. So the image was of you free climbing the side of the cliff and being stopped near the top with no visible hand or footholds to move to. And you hanging there and being very relaxed and very confident in your in this pose of just kind of looking around and looking for that next hold. And as you were staying there, and I was wondering, man, how is he so relaxed? He's not harnessed in, like there's no safety. There's nowhere for him to go. He's kind of stuck in this position. How is he so relaxed right now? And then this giant eagle flies by, and you lift your hand up, and the eagle pulls you up, and you go flying off to the top of the cliff, top of the mountain. And I just love that image. And Spirit said the eagle is his breath, which was also really magical. But I wonder if you could take this image and ride with it just for a few minutes and share with us what it feels like to be in a really tough position, which I think a lot of people are finding themselves in right now, in this three-dimensional sort of literal reality of livelihood and, you know, all of the changes that we're experiencing, all of the uncertainty, and to feel like there's no clear step forward that we're looking at, and to not go into fear and panic, and, you know, to waste all that energy that you were using to hang on the side of, you know, not exhausting yourself hanging in this position. You would exhaust yourself if you went into fear and panic right in that moment. So what does that look like? Can you give us any advice about how to stay open towards the creative solutions that the universe wants to bring us?
So, yeah, I think that resonates so much, because the last time I got not the last time I got a psychic reading, but I got this reading last year from somebody who used wire, and they made the wire into this mountain. And that's what they said, something about, like, you know, rising to the top of this mountain, or and so the mountain image resonates. Last last night, my partner and I were riding our bikes to her house, and it's this steep hill that goes through a cemetery. It's really nice. There's no cars, and there's also an eagle's nest. And she always likes to stop, and we kind of hang out and, like, see if we can hear them or see them. And it's way up in this tree. There were some babies, and we watched the babies grow a little bit, and sometimes down at the river we'll see the adults flying around. There's these two beautiful big eagles. And last night, as I was riding past the spot where we would normally stop, I was tired, and I was like, I just don't want to lose my momentum. And the thought came, it's like, yeah, that eagle medicine is always with you. That it doesn't matter about stopping and looking at the eagles. The eagle medicine is always with you, and that's the breath. So that really, and another thing that pops into mind is the first time that I did ayahuasca. The first kind of vision I had, as I did a lot of cleaning out, and then there was this vision of, I was a hawk, and I was high up on a mountain and just gliding. And that feeling of just pure, just like effortless trust, gliding, I was shown this is love. This is the energy of love. It's just being fully supported, just flying from up on high. And so those images all came to mind around that. And the clinging to the side of the cliff in a relaxed state, that's trust. That's for me, when I first got into my own self-healing and getting into my work, and it was hard. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of commitment and work, and knowing that I'm not willing to keep living feeling as horrible as I do. So I'm going to do something about it. And as I discovered the breath helped with that, gradually over the years, and I've been doing this for a long time, it's brought me to a place of complete trust that if something happens to me where I get triggered and all of a sudden I'm just in this like icky emotion, I trust. I know that I have a tool that will help me move through this, and that it's not dependent on somebody else. And we need community, we need our people, but my healing isn't dependent on anybody else doing anything to me or for me. I know that I can lay down and just do this breathing cycle and work through whatever it is, no matter how daunting it is, no matter how dark it looks. And sometimes it takes work, sometimes it takes years for certain things. There's things I've worked on that have taken years to heal because there's layers going deeper and deeper. But there's trust, and that trust, knowing that I can heal whatever comes up, and also that the trust, when you see behind the scenes, that death isn't the end. It's just a period at the end of the sentence, and then there's another sentence and another sentence. And so that trust of, because like you said, a lot of that fear comes from annihilation, and we can feel like, that annihilation can feel like it's on a soul level, like that death might mean we end. But when you have that awakening and you get to see behind the scenes, and that it's not the end, and I love my life, but I'm not attached to it. And if it was to end, I know it's not the end. And so it kind of removes some of that fear. I still process fear, but then it goes back to the trust. Like if fear comes up, if I read some article about something that creates fear, I know I can just sit and process it. So there's that trust, and then just coming back to the breath. And what I would recommend for people in this chaotic times, and it might continue to be chaotic. When I've been talking to people lately, there's this sense of like, we have no idea what's really going on, because you can see what's going on and then like see something of like, oh, behind the scenes there's this, and behind the scenes there's this, and like, and these different agendas, and you just get so much wrapped up in 3D story right now. But to step out of that, I just invite people to step out of that. Meditation, I feel like, is so important to quiet the mind. Leonard Orr, the founder of Rebirthing Breathwork, he taught that, you know, God exists in the space between our thoughts. And through using mantra, meditation, just conscious breathing, you know, just I'm aware I'm breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing out. You know, Amma has been teaching to use the sound ma on the inhale. So just in your mind, just breathe, meditating, thinking ma. It's this primordial sound, and om on the exhale. Very simple, but it carries a primordial vibration that soothes us, that can help us take a break from 3D, because 3D is demanding our attention right now. And we are also, as we awaken, we're merging 3D into 4D and 5D, and to take that time, yeah, to step away, quiet, just breathe, relax, take a bath. You know, the elements, you brought in the elements before we started the recording, and yeah, sit with a fire, take a bath, walk in the forest, breathe. Earth, air, water, fire support us. And just stepping away from that lure to read the next article, because, you know, yeah, we want to know what's happening. We want to feel safe in our world and have that awareness. And also at the same time, you know, looking at the things we can control. We can't control this stuff that's happening in the, you know, out in our world. Where can we control things? You know, how can we be a better person with our neighbor, with our community, and just, you know, our neighborhood, and yeah, I mean, that's, and just, yeah, just those moments of peace that you can give ourselves, you know, because we might not be getting peace from our external world, so we have to give it to ourselves, and knowing in each person's individual practice what cultivates that for them. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you.
There's the Hershey kiss.
The Hershey kiss. Yeah. I keep seeing the wind underneath the hawk. You know, I keep thinking about that trust and love, right? I think that when we can't trust, of course we can't love. And when we don't trust, we try to control. And when we try to control, that's the opposite of love. That's fear, right? And so that sort of works in and through all of our relationships, but especially our relationship with the divine or with the universe. And I think that, you know, I was having a particularly difficult moment this morning with feeling trust about this next step, you know, on my own sort of hang on the cliff. I was having some flailing moments, and, you know, universe was like, but haven't we always supported you? Like, haven't you always been fine, you know? And it's that same thing with like the eagle or the hawk trusting the air to be there. Even though we can't see the air, the eagle actually can see the air. We can't see the air, but it just looks like just blind trust, right? That the eagle is going to just jump off the edge of that cliff and that the air is going to hold them. And so I think that there's a certain amount of trust that we need to give to ourselves and to the universe. And I love this idea that, you know, no matter what happens, if you learn some of these breathing techniques, that your breath is always with you. It's not something, unless it's being forcefully taken away from you, or, you know, you can't, you know, in most circumstances, we do have the freedom to breathe. And that we should use that freedom to our best benefit to help us come into a place of trust, into a place of love, and to address our fear, right? Address the places where fear exists, that it doesn't necessarily need to reside. And, you know, the Hershey kiss on top of the Hershey kiss is to recognize that we live in a society that trains us to be addicted to fear from a very young age, right? We're fed media. It's the spectacle of it. It's the experience of the adrenaline rush and our sort of desire to feel that adrenaline rush, to feel that controlled fear reaction, you know, watching horror movies or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so I think too, you know, the mantra for me with our thirst for knowledge, right? Our thirst for truth that's happening right now with the unveiling, is to be in balance with strengthening ourselves and not straining ourselves. So draw in truth information in a way that reinforces and strengthens our own ability to be present and to be loving and to be strong and to be advocates. But when we go into that area,
to hold our note. So it's, yeah, that's what's been coming up a lot for me also, is that, like you're saying, like, we each have an individual note. And when we hold that note, it will harmonize with everyone else's note. And sometimes we have to find it. Yeah. And be strong in our note and hold it.
Maintain it. Yeah, maintain that note.
And it may not be somebody else's note, but it can harmonize with theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that jigsaw puzzle, we each have like a really important part to play in the overall picture, right? And to honor that uniqueness that is us, which I think immediately brings, there's so much. We could dig in there really, really deep, and we won't because the time. But I think that when we're in pain, we tend to look at people who are in a different place than us and envy them, or we tend to look at where we wish we were and feel really sad that we're not where we wish we were. That one of my teachers, who was actually 2 episodes ago, Matt Kaufman, brought this up yesterday in a call, talking about the horizon, that what we desire, and for me, that's east and the sun and fire. This is our passion, our desire for the futures. What we desire to experience in the future is there as the horizon. The horizon's always a moving point, right? So if we get into this place of sadness or depletion because we're not there, we're not at the horizon, we're not at our vision, we can fall into the gap that's between where we are and where we want to go. But if we actually look behind us at where we've come from, then we understand, like universe saying like, but haven't I always supported you? Haven't you always been okay? If we look back and be like, miraculously, yeah, we have always been okay. That's pretty amazing. And Spirit also said the other day, like, take a look from your future to where you are now. So look from your future self to where you are now with that same amount of compassion and that same amount of gentleness and understanding and love that you have when you look back on your past and you go, wow, that was some tough stuff, but we made it through and we learned so much,
We're all doing the best we can, and we're coping and keeping ourselves alive, and there's nothing wrong with that. To have gratitude for all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that gentleness, just the gentleness and gratitude for what is here.
Spirit has us.
Yeah.
Spirit's got us.
It's got us. And whatever we experience, and there's always so much to be grateful for. So I'm grateful for you spending your morning with me and having this conversation.
I'd love to share about some resources.
Yes, please.
People can use. A friend of mine, some friends of mine have this daily online breathing site. It's called Our Breath Collective, ourbreathcollective.com. And every morning they do about 15 minutes of breath work. It can be Wim Hof breathing, circular breathing. There's three main facilitators, and they have guests. It's a monthly subscription. And then you can, if you don't catch it, I think they do it at 6 in the morning. If you don't catch it, you can listen to it later. But it's a great way to start your day with some breath work. Mm-hmm. And I do virtual group rebirthing breath works through their site about once every month and a half or so. Okay. And it's for subscribers, it's free. For non-subscribers, it's only like $20. So it's a really economical way to do a rebirthing breathwork session. And so often it's through Zoom. Awesome. And then also I'd invite people to subscribe to my mailing list on my website. I do events. I've got a week-long rebirthing training coming up in October, a breathwork training that we weren't able to do in person this year, so we're doing it online. And then I send out reminders about the yoga breathwork class. So there's support out there, and I'm doing Zoom sessions, which works great for people, and just knowing that, you can go to YouTube and just search like breath work, and just find all these different types of breathing, and that the resources are out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I also think that having a guide is so helpful. Having a facilitator is so helpful. And I've experienced breath work with you and with a few other practitioners. And I have to say, the way that you hold space, I'm sure people can tell just from the conversation, but the way that you hold space is so soothing and calming and solid at the same time. And so it's really helpful to have someone like that can really hold you in that space, especially because it is so vulnerable and you are taking yourself really deep into that space of cleansing and clearing and trauma work, right? So it is really helpful to have a practitioner that can hold you through that. I'm really glad that this medium works to do that, because Yeah,
And in a
it's
way,
very,
it's
very
nice. People enjoy it because they can finish their breathwork cycle and then they don't have to get up and drive home. You know,
mm-hmm.
they can just stay in that relaxed space as long as they want.
Altered space. I will say altered space. I remember getting off the mat and being like, I'm gonna have to drive, and I know people used to have that with my work too. When I did body work more, people would stand up and be like, oh my God, I can't even walk straight. How am I gonna drive a car? It must be really nice for people to just be able to click the computer off and roll over and take a nap or do whatever they need to do, take a bath, and just remain in that space with their work. That's beautiful. And I'm glad that you're able to do group work as well. That's a great resource. I'm going to definitely put that below the video, and I'm going to check it out.
The last couple I've done on our Breath Collective have had around 40 people.
Wonderful.
It just, it creates this collective, even though people are around the world, it creates this web, this energetic web and collective experience. Yeah, it's powerful.
What we need. It's what we need. I've been envisioning it for years. These, with the Hope Seed project, it was something we were doing with planting actual Herkimer diamonds in the earth and gridding them. But all of these groups that are happening right now, we're in our own little pods, energetically cleansing, and then we're connecting to each other in these groups that wouldn't necessarily be able to happen in life, in three-dimensional in-person reality, right? But because of Zoom and because of these other online platforms, we can meet in these groups that are able to cover the whole earth, and we do this amazing transformational work together, and then we just ground that energy into the earth all around the planet. It's incredible. It's quite a unique opportunity, so it's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for doing this and joining me here today.
Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Oh, yay. I know that people are going to benefit so much from what you shared. You shared so many practical tools and so many inspiring ideas. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you next month with episode 22 of Stories of Awakening. Be well, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and see you next time. Bye.